sure we honor Laura. So go ahead and say what you said before we hit record, because Laura is the one that started all of this.
Yeah, special thanks to Laura McKeon, who got all of this set up and really set up the structure for everything behind the scenes. So it is absolutely delightful that she was a part of this, and I filled in for 4 months of the last 6. So over to you,
Sweet.
Paula.
Okay, you got it. All right. Okay, you guys. This is very exciting. Let me get my screen set up here. This is our slide. So we ended in the middle. We ended in the middle of chapter 23 last time. And the way we started was I made it very clear that I did not want to rush through it, that this was a really important chapter. And when I finished and I like thought about it later, it occurred to me because one of the takeaways from the chapter 23 is that we shouldn't be working with exiles until we're level 2 trained. And, you know, I made a comment like, yeah, this is what Frank's telling us. And right, like, and is that possible? And I said my own workaround was that I went through IFSCA up in Canada because you get to work with exiles right away. And that worked for me. And Frank actually recommended it. That's where I found IFSCA. So I wanted to really make sure that we spent time because you guys that work with me, you know, I talk fast and I rush through the content. I didn't want to rush through this, so I didn't. And so that's why we ended in the middle of chapter 23. So with that being said, we're going to pick up where we left off. There's something that I've done that's different with this chapter and then our chapter 26, I believe it is. No, chapter 25. I have put case examples in as we talk about Frank's steps. So not only do I think personally that I have a beautiful example of healing in exile that we went over in the last time we met, but I have an even more, oh my gosh, an even more beautiful case example of unburdening generational shame. It was freaking amazing. So with that being said, I'd love to get to it today. But if we don't, I am going to either, you know, do one more recording and we'll put it out there for you, or we're going to meet in 1 month to finish up because I just really want to honor Frank's work. And I don't want to cram these last chapters in because we had designated this to be our last day. So just putting that out there. And so with that being said, let me get going. Like I said, I want to get you guys up on my screen so I can see you. I have no idea why I can't see you. Sad, sad. Eric, you can see the slide, okay? There we are. Shows video panel. I'm assuming you said yes. I can't see you yet, but okay, thumbs up. He gives me a thumbs up. Cool beans. All right. Okay. All right. Let's get this party started. So, chapter 23, we were talking about how to work with an exile. With complex trauma, we have layers and layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of protector parts. I re-listened to chapter 23 yesterday or the day before. I don't usually re-listen to myself, and because I can be really critical. And I thought, you know what? I think I really nailed it. So if you haven't listened to the last one, make sure you do. But one of the things I heard myself saying, though, is that there's no self energy for our complex clients, our really complex clients. And I didn't mean to say there was no self energy, higher self energy. I need to make sure I clarify this. It's there. It's just we can't find it. It's there somewhere. It's like having the sun out, but on a very, very, very cloudy day. And so we have to go finding it. And so when we start, and we'll talk about this today, when we start, we are the higher self energy for our clients. And our clients, we will assume if they have complex trauma, that they have zero. So that's what I was saying. I didn't want to speak through or over the internal family systems head and say there's no self energy because Dr. Or Dick Schwartz is very, very specific. Everybody has self energy. And since we're on that topic super quick, I just want to put out there, self-energy is not a part. It is an essence. It's an energy. It's like a, you can't put language to it. It's nonverbal. And so trying to find that with clients that are very traumatized is difficult. Okay, enough on that. So our 6 steps of healing, just to review, witnessing, do-over, retrieval, upload, invitation, and integration. So we are assuming that we've gotten past the protectors, that we've worked with the protectors, that we've honored the protectors. And part of what was in the story that I utilized in our meeting a month ago was that there were 2 protector parts, because I brought a real client situation here. We had started with an overeating part, which is a firefighter. The client wanted to work on this, and that there was an angry part that hated the overeating part. And I think that a lot of us can relate to that when we have bad habits or things that we do that might be like an addiction of some sort. We have a part that really hates that we do that. And it wants the angry parts, like, I want you to die. I want you out of here. I want you gone. And we cannot work with the exile as long as those parts are not getting along. So there's some work to do. And so you need to go to another chapter when it comes to working with polarized parts. But so our first step here is to witness the exile. And so in this particular example, and you can go back, like I said, there's a whole story. I'm not going to read it. It's called The Lonely Part, but the lonely part was accessed, and it was able to witness, it was able to share its story of how it ended, how it got there. The lonely part talks about like losing its dad and how sad it was and how alone it was. And so basically angry and overeater were in there like helping it in some way, shape, or form. The next step is the do-over. Once the exile has shared its story, and we're not talking like sharing it in 15 minutes, we're talking like really sharing it. And we're there, you, the therapist, are there to kind of be in witness to, or to be there with the client who's in their self energy. If they can't be in that beautiful self energy, then this isn't going to work. So this is like takes a while to get to. And not only is the client going to be in their self energy, but you are in your self energy. You're not leading, you are just being present with the client. So we have a do-over where the higher self provides love and protection and safety. The client's higher self is going to ask, what did you need? And be able to just hold that exiled part, that wounded child part, and help it in that moment. And then once the corrective experience is over, we are going to do a retrieval. And a retrieval is where that exile chooses a place, a time in the client's life, present day, that it would like to go, a place that's safe. So literally the higher self is grabbing the hand of the little one and taking it. I think of like Peter Pan, even though I don't know much about that movie, but I think of them taking the hand and taking that exile to a place of beauty and safety. And in this particular story, the exile wanted to go to a concert because this client goes to a lot of concerts. And so, the higher self took the exile, and that's what a retrieval is. And then we go to Frank's next step, which is an upload, where the exile releases the burdens, releases them. And so here, the client is at the concert and it's brought its young part with it, and it's releasing what it is that has been burdening this young one for so long. And you can release it in any way, shape, or form. But this is just an example of a client that went through these steps of Frank's. And then there's the invitation, where we invite the part to take on new qualities, to bring in. And so this is Gabramonte's. We actually played the video last month of Gabramonte talking about the difference between attachment and authenticity. And this is where we get to invite authenticity in. And so this particular client's brought in, see if I have it listed. This particular client brought in boundaries and like ability to communicate boundaries. And then our last step is integration, where this is where you practice. And as you recall, a month ago, there was a list of like literal integration questions that I pulled that we utilize, like a rehearse and a rescript and rehearse. where you're able to take like appropriate boundaries and communication and integrate it into your life on a week-to-week basis and review that with your therapist. So like I said, this is a review. Not rushing through this because you can go back to the chapter and listen to it. It's a beautiful story. It works very well with Frank's steps. And so sometimes we just need that in order to really learn. So that's where we left off a month ago. And so here we are. And so I'm just going to, like I said, kind of jump in and let's finish our chapter 3. So with healing emotional wounds, which is our exiles, there are different types of healing, and there are lots of challenges that we can run in. So healing from relational trauma often means limited access to self-energy, and that's what we just said. Relational trauma is complex trauma. Relational trauma is going to be those attachment wounds. And if you have attachment wounds, you're not going to know how to take care of yourself. And so that higher self, wherever it may be, and it is there, we just need to find it. We need to not only find it, but we need to invite it to join us so that we can work with it. The protective systems dominate. You know this. You're in your office working with your clients, and if you meet them where they're at, you're meeting a protector part. That's why there's so many advanced trainings out there right now about how to work with protector parts. We absolutely need to know not only how to work with a protector part, but polyvagal is essential, because without knowing what polyvagal energy the protector part is holding, you will not know how to work with it. And so every day that goes by, I think therapists are starting to realize that polyvagal is something that we absolutely not only have to learn, but we have to understand. And if you've seen the language and you've seen what it looks like in somebody's body, you're like, wow, that's pretty overwhelming. I mean, at the end of the day, the parasympathetic and sympathetic, just that language in itself can be confusing. So, but that's for another presentation. Container theory that Frank refers to is not the container theory that we are privy to in EMDR trainings. This container theory is more like if you have a meeting place. I don't know if some of you guys do meeting place. If you don't, you should. And if you have a room, like a waiting room or some area where the protectors can kind of hang out and wait until it's like time for them to kind of work with whatever content it is that we're working with, it really allows more energy, it allows more space for self and whatever part we're meeting. Like we say, we meet the client where they're at in each session, what part we're working with. So we have protector parts that show up, and we ask them to soften back. But the container theory is basically speaking to, if we get them to soften back and we have a place for them where we're honoring them, but we're not working with them in that moment, that's going to help us. That's going to be a positive toward it. It just assists us with the work that we're doing. And that healing depends on the access and willingness to risk vulnerability. So those protector parts, they don't want to be vulnerable. They absolutely not. Where did they come from? They came from vulnerability that was abused. And so they're there to protect. Even small openings allow us a gift of self-energy to emerge. So we're always looking for that opportunity. That's where the visual is here. We're just looking for the smallest opportunity. And one of the examples I give is I always use the acronym HUGS. HUGS, I hear you, I understand you, I get you, I see you. It's a way to build self-energy, a client's self-energy. And I always say it's a way to hug your client without touching them. It really works for me because I'm not a toucher. I don't like to touch my clients. Some people, do, whatever. That's maybe before the pandemic, maybe not anymore. But if you want to hug your client, you just hear them, you understand them, you get them, you see them. And that's going to allow you these really small opportunities to invite the client's self-energy in. So if you're like listening to a story, let's say you're listening to the story we were talking about earlier with that lonely part, talking about, when the client's father died, and that part was all alone and so sad. And I, the therapist, am going to say, wow, I can totally hear what you're saying. I can understand why you were so lonely. And then you invite the client and you just say, can you understand why that part was so lonely? And the client, it's like, yeah, totally. I can totally understand. Oh my gosh, I was there. That's a horrible, that's a really devastating story. It's like right there is your opening. Right there is your opening for that self to part relationship. And then setting a stage of different types of unburdening. We're going to talk about a very beautiful example of generational unburdening. Maybe today, maybe not. No pressure on me. So Francine's container versus Frank's container. Just wanted to make sure that we were clear that it's very different. We've got the protector parts that we've got contained, but not contained in a way that we're closing them off, contained in a way that they're hanging out. We're honoring what they do and who they are and how they got there, no matter what, if they're a self-harming part or a part that lies or a part that, that wants the client to die. At the end of the day, there are no bad parts. We want to honor, and we're honoring. When you honor a part, no matter what part it is, they're going to start figuring out how to trust you. And at the end of the day, that is the key. Just kind of going back to the example at the very beginning, we had two polarized parts that we had to work with before we could get to the exile. That overeating part has been around for a long time for that client. And that angry part, like I said, wanted it to die. And so we had to go in and work with that protector part that wanted to kill off the overeating part. And if you've ever dieted, you know what that's like, or if you've ever had to stop drinking, you know what it's like. It's like, I need that part to just disappear. That doesn't work. That's why we really struggle with some of our treatment centers out there for higher levels of care, because I'll never forget my niece. It was my niece who was at an eating disorder clinic, and they're like, oh, your eating disorder is the dragon and we need to slay the dragon. And I'm like, no, you don't slay the dragon, you freaking love the dragon. Like, what's wrong with you people? That was a while ago, so hopefully it's all changed. It was in another state across the country. So this is the graph that just kind of depicts Frank Anderson's talk about unblending or unburdening. And I like it, even though I'm kind of confused with the language around what's linear and what's not. We always start with direct access. I always start with direct access. I find it confusing to like meet a client where they're at and think, can I use direct access or should I go right into insight? I just like, it's how my brain thinks automatically. Can you check the mutes on everybody, Eric? Thanks. So direct access is where we start. And when you think of direct access, there's two pieces. There's implicit and explicit. And just remember, direct access means I am the self energy for the client. The client's self energy is behind the clouds. I am the self energy. And I have two ways of working with the client. One is by just implicitly working with the client's part, which is right in front of me, or explicitly, which means I'm going to let the client know that I'm working with the part. And I personally like to use the language of role play. I'm in improv, so that makes sense for me. So I say to the client, you're really angry right now. Can you role play that angry part? That's direct access. Explicit. I'm asking the client to separate just a little bit. I got that from IFSCA. And so just a little bit, if they role played anger, they know that anger is a little bit separated from them. But if it's implicit, I'm just working with the angry, like, wow, you look really angry today. Tell me what's up. That's direct access, implicit. So we start there. And then when we're working, we go from implicit maybe to explicit, and then we go from explicit into insight is what they call it. And when you think about insight is like, I'm going to be learning something insightful. I'm going to be learning more. And we only do that when the client is completely able to unblend the part, which means they have a little bit of self energy. So the client and the therapist are working together as the self, right? I'm the higher self. And now my client, I've invited my client's higher self to join me. And we are working together with the part. And so this is the cumulative unburdening. Like we're working together And then slowly over time, we get to a traditional healing where the self and the client, and I'm taking a step back. They've got Frank uses the word adjunct. I'm taking a step back and I'll pop in when necessary. I'm there to support the client's self and the relationship between the self and the part. And yeah, it's kind of beautiful, right? It's beautiful when it makes sense. And all of that to me makes sense. So hopefully to you, it starts to make sense. And once again, how do I do it and how do I teach it in that order? I don't, and maybe I'm sure that's like not the most organic way, but for me, I find internal family systems. I love the fact that Dick Schwartz has language for absolutely everything that you do with parts. And I'm a teacher, so I want to teach. And so the language works great for me. And I just need it in order. They call it scaffolding at IFSCA. So maybe they call that everywhere, but all right. So what did I do? I took the different aspects of our unburdening and I put little symbols over it so that maybe just for me. But the first one is blending with direct access. The natural order of healing is best guided by the system's own wisdom and readiness. When my client walks in and I say, "Hey, what's up? Where do you want to start?" I'm literally asking, what part is here right now that we're going to work with? It's really helped me with EMDR because that's how I find my targets these days. Healing often begins with direct access. Here we are. It's often begins, says Frank. I would say it always begins, just to make life easy, especially when the client's self is not yet available. Well, guess what? In complex trauma, you can assume the client's self is not available. How many times do we do polyvagal mapping with our clients and there's no green? In fact, what do my clients say? "Oh, yeah, when I smoke weed, I'm in green." And then we call that fake green. We don't tell them that, but that is totally red. At the end of the day, you can't be in green when you've experienced complex trauma because you are constantly assessing your external environment for danger. And Lord knows there's a lot of danger externally right now. So green is not an option. And that's where self lives. Self lives in green. Once again, polyvagal is imperative because as you build green, as you work on that ventral vagal, if it's humming, singing, breathing, whatever, there's so many different ways now. You can even order things online to get your ventral vagal going. That's where the self is. So let's get our polyvagal up to date so that we can work on starting to create where green is self is going to be housed. And then the therapist self may do the early witnessing. It's not may do, the therapist self will do the early witnessing with our complex clients. And as trust and self energy grow, the client's self gradually emerges. And it's beautiful. It's true. Like I said, I do polyvagal mapping and I'm working on green, and you're just having your client engage in moments, and then you put language to it, and then we strengthen and enhance it with our EMDR tools. And the self starts to really emerge. And it's so cool. And we have tools to do this because we're not just IFS therapists. The client self can be complete can then complete the remaining steps of the unburdening. So at the end of the day, we want self to part. And I, the therapist, am taking a step back. And I'm just so proud of the work that we're doing because we've worked really hard to get there. This evolution from direct access to traditional unburdening reflects the organic, nonlinear nature of healing. So I don't know, maybe I get too linear about it, but all right. So what is the relational unburdening? It happens when the client self is present but not fully strong and steady. So as long as there's presence, going in the right direction. Therapist's self energy is invited to support the client, especially helpful when. And I thought this was interesting. I threw in the dorsal energy, but Frank says, especially when you have exiles carrying attachment trauma, when you have parts that are shaped by neglect, and when you have clients with DID or structural dissociation. And I'm like, hello, this is dorsal vagal energy. This is shutdown energy. This is Frank is basically saying that when you have parts that are basically in a dissociative shutdown with dorsal vagal energy, low heart rate, low blood pressure, endorphins, releasing opiates, numbing feeling. You're in an energy that is different that you need to just honor and be with and be present. So the client self stays in charge, guiding what support is needed. But the therapist offers presence. I love that. Offers presence without control. I tell this story about working with dissociative parts using internal family systems. I was a hospice therapist. I sucked at it. You can imagine I would bust into the room with my energy and my sense of humor. No, not with someone who's dying. So I learned, and I learned how to put this in my notes. Therapist was present. That's all I did for my 9 months of that internship. Therapist was present. That's all I had to do. It was so difficult. It like I couldn't sit still, but I got it. I finally got it. And it was hilarious when like, here I am like whatever, 10 years later, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what it is. That's how we're supposed to work with dissociative parts. And when I saw Frank say this, I was like, this is perfect. Therapists offer presence without control, creating safety, not direction. I'm all about direction. So this was a huge learning piece, kind of an aha moment for me. So I just want to share that with you. So what Frank's referring to is when we're working with the type of complex attachment ruptures that we are going to be working with complex trauma, that our presence of self is going to be about being there, but not about taking over and doing everything. And sometimes that can be hard for us. So it's not about doing for the client, it's about being with them. And that is what I learned in my hospice work. Pull up a chair, maybe have the chair at the door, maybe have the chair outside in the hall, but let the client know, I am here with you. You are not alone. And that's it. There's nothing more for you to do. The power of shared self energy. Therapist self supports the healing of parts without leading the process. So, this can occur in couples work where one partner holds self energy while the other heals. I don't do couples work except for when I work with polarized parts, but the goal is to create a loving relationship context for transformation. You're creating this environment where this transformation is going to take place. And there's collective self energy, which provides not only a container for safety, a felt sense of connection, but greater access to the unburdening for exiles. So this is just an ongoing option around bringing in our energy. It seems often in live IFS demonstrations where shared present facilitates healing. It took me a while to learn this. I'm a trainer. Eric can attest to this. When we do demos where we used to bring in our participants, but we don't do that anymore. But it really took for me to witness this, the energy of everybody there, the shared present held these therapists when we were working with them. And I always felt that it was a very risky thing to do. I'm very risk adverse, but it really was amazing. So shared presence can be an amazing energy. And it's like I said, it's not about directing, it's about being. So relational unburdening honors the truth that we heal in connection. Hello, polyvagal. That is what polyvagal is all about. Polyvagal is safety is our treatment plan, and we heal in connection, co-connection with others. That is that life-saving aspect that we need. But I always say, we can't connect with others externally until we can connect with ourselves internally. So that means that even though our external world is falling apart and feels dangerous, we have a lot of work and a lot of hope for us therapists because the work is here. And that's once again why internal family systems, polyvagal is so important. I throw in the polyvagal stuff. Just know that. I'm sure you guys are not shocked. Frank will refer to polyvagal energy once in a while, but I'm really beefing it up here. So what is cumulative unburdening? So healing happens gradually. I'm sure that doesn't surprise you across multiple sessions. Now, I can't tell you how many freaking sessions we need in internal family systems. So coming from an EMDR perspective, when we do something, it's done. It's re-encoded. It's rewritten. It's transformational. We look for state changes, not trait changes. We do in 20 minutes what it takes 5 hours to do in talk therapy. So when you tell me internal family systems that I need 21 days to make neural networks kind of like bind, link, bind, or connect, I'm like, who the frick has 21 days? But I love IFS, so we're going to figure out how to integrate that at some point, EMDR and IFS, so we don't have to spend so much time. But this is what Frank's speaking to. Healing is gradual. Self energy is limited. Protectors take time to build trust and allow access to the exiles. We are called exile hunters, those of us that are looking for the exiles without really taking into consideration how much time and effort and energy and welcoming and appreciating and acknowledging and accepting and building trust with these protectors is going to be necessary to get to the exiles. It is a process. Witnessing begins in small doses, session by session. The story unfolds over time, preventing system overwhelm. The extended witness phase can last weeks or months. Healing happens in pieces, not all at once. So this is a really important slide because it's like, this is going to take a long time. I don't know about you guys, but I, I'm like, I don't have this much time. But of course, as therapists, we're supposed to. But, we all have our downfalls. So I'm going to integrate EMDR because you could do parts work on steroids once you get that bilateral going. Another training. All right. So characteristics of cumulative unburdening steps. Okay, here we are. Here's our steps. Retrieval, do-over. The unburdening often occurs. It occurs out of order. It occurs in fragments and it occurs across all sessions. And I guess my comment on this based on my own experience is I'll do this work and I'll be in this linear list of like, first I'm going to do direct access and I'm going to do insight. But what I find is as you're moving through this, each time you go back to do it again, it goes faster. Working with dissociative parts and creating trust with them, they have the gate open when you come in for a session now after you've built that trust with them. It takes a while to build trust with a dissociative part because they don't like you. They don't like anything about you. They are there to protect the client from you. So, when I learned that, what was it? Therapist. Oh, I forget. Anyway, somebody put it in the chat what it spells backwards. It was kind of shocking, but burdening, the not being in order. In other words, it's like Roy Kiesling used to say, we're always draining from the same trauma pool. So as you do this over and over again, like I said, the parts trust you and they just open the gates. And so it's a lot easier to get to where you're trying to get to. Healing relational shame, abandonment, and neglect takes even longer. Fierce protectors resist stepping back. Self-energy is often minimally present, if at all. Pushing too fast can lead to protector backlash. It requires deep patience and self-energy from the therapist. Are you in self-energy? Frank said that he spent the majority of his therapy after internal family systems, which he had with Dick, by the way, working on his own parts and how they got in the way of the work that he was doing with his clients. And so one of the things that IFSCA up in Canada recommends is you get a coach. Oh my gosh, my coach has been priceless. And I got a coach right away. And you get a coach that not only does IFS with you, but then helps you work through truly understanding it. Respecting the system's pace is part of the healing. And sometimes we therapists, especially we EMDR therapists that are used to, things moving along, we need to respect the pace of the parts, and that can be hard. Traditional IFS unburdening taught in IFS level 1 and can often happen in a single session. I don't know about that. In a single session, like I don't know. So, but once again, we're here to honor Frank, so can't agree with absolutely everything he says, maybe 99% of it. He's teaching right now for free. He's amazing. Taught, let's see, self energy is the primary healing force. I think we all know that. There's a difference between self-led parts, self-like parts. Self-led and self-like parts are very important. They are parts and they are leaders, but self-energy is not a part. It's an essence. It's an energy. And it is what runs the show at the end of the day. And that's what we're working toward. Therapist gently supports and guides the process, which often involves one exile with one wound. Okay, I can see where this might work quickly with one exile with one wound, but with complex trauma, you're not going to find one exile with one wound. One exile with multiple wounds. Okay, now we're talking. We've got complex trauma, several exiles with several wounds. That sounds even more familiar. Exiles connected to each parent. This also sounds familiar. Present day exiles linked to earlier exiles. Okay, now we're getting complicated. Multiple exiles with multiple different wounds. So healing tends to unfold progressively across time. And there's a treatment graph, and I don't think I put that in the slide. So from left to right, but I did come up with my own interpretation of that. So the traumatic pain can also be released through religious and spiritual experiences, corrective emotional experiences, the healing of relationships, time in nature, psychedelics and medicine work, very popular with IFS in some parts, and other therapy models and approaches. So at the end of the day, we're all, our goal is the same thing. We just may be doing it in different ways. But I do have to put out there that in my own experience, I have done a lot of EMDR because that's how I, came to love EMDR. We never got to the exiles. Okay, long sets of bilateral, sets and sets and sets and sets of bilateral. Did some beautiful work, beautiful work. Different person. That's great. And we never got to the exiles. The work that I'm doing now is just insane. So, so I can speak to both personally. That's my experience. So once again, just kind of reiterating what we just went over, looking at direct access, looking at the relational unburdening that's going to involve the client and the therapist working on self, this cumulative unburdening, and the shifting over to the traditional healing where the self of the client is basically in charge, and then we are just there to support. And that this is a lot of time when we're looking at complex trauma. A lot of time, especially when you think about it being 21 days to create a neural network path. Yeah, that sounds like a lot, doesn't it? All right, so moving to chapter 4. Eric, you got any comments, questions? I'm going to take a sip of my drink here.
No, Paula, folks are doing great. I really like where this is going. By the way, there are some initial Dick Schwartz videos because remember his original population that he was working with most frequently were disordered eating clients that were doing unburdening. And again, at the time that he was working, disordered eating treatment was generally for adolescents, more geared for adolescents than it was towards adult populations. I remember taking a class with him in the early 2000s, and he was demonstrating some good stuff about unburdening of those parts.
That's interesting. So I knew that he worked with eating disorders, but he worked with adolescents.
Well, the primary part of those treatment programs at that point, specifically at Lutheran General in Park Ridge, Illinois, was where he was working, which was that facility was geared towards disordered eating up to young adults.
Interesting. Okay, because it's, as I learn more about polyvagal, and I know that the neurobiology aspect of polyvagal, when you're a teenager, you're missing a lot from a neurobiological perspective around entering into that ventral state. And this isn't going to mean anything to anybody, but I'm getting a polyvagal certificate, and so I have to learn a lot more. But it's like the nerve is unmyelinated mostly for adolescents, which means that ventral vagal is not accessible for adolescents, and that's interesting because I really do struggle sometimes with how Dick taught IFS and how complex his clients were, because his clients were super complex. But
Well,
okay,
we
just
have
a
to think
thought.
of when the original book was written, which was in '97. So all
Uh,
of that, much of that has matured in terms of what's available now, which is really essentially around the same time that Francine's original book came out. So,
yeah, good
um,
point.
so just thinking about what we know now versus what we knew then.
Cool. Thank you. I love that. Um, okay, so chapter 24. Dick Schwartz says it takes 3 to 4 weeks before an exile appears to integrate back into the system. So once again, we're talking about a lot of time here. He recommends that our clients check in with their unburdened parts every day for 3 to 4 weeks. I don't know, like I really, it really speaks to my personality. I struggle with that. um, we'll see. It's on a slide to come, so I'll speak to it when it gets here. So integration phase, like phase 8 of EMDR, where we are putting the past into present perspective, and the integration can be assisted with a rescript or rehearse, which integrates new learning into our current lives. And the scripts for the rescript rehearse were in the last presentation. I just threw them in. And at the end of the day, it's like, okay, we're gonna create this self-to-part relationship. And then somehow we need to get our client to do it every day between sessions. And that is a big ask. It just is. I mean, you could do it first week, second week, but if you have to do this every day for 3 to 4 weeks, that's a lot. And if it takes 3 to 4 weeks for you actually to get to an exile, I guess, when we're working with complex trauma with layers and layers and layers and layers, there's a lot of of work to be done. What is our new way of being in the world, or how do we need to incorporate new skills? So when you think about Gabermonte's video, once again, played it a month ago, past, present, looking at the attachment, you need to get your attachment needs met, and you're going to do what you have to do that. And so we always say you can copy or mimic your parent, your abuser, your perpetrator, because you need to get those needs met. And then once you're like in therapy and you come in and you're like, I don't even know who I am, that totally makes sense. Of course, you don't know who you are. You've just spent your entire life trying to survive. And now let's figure out who you are. What are your values? Values recognition is a really important part of motivational interviewing. Literally moves somebody from pre-contemplation to contemplation stage of change. So being able to figure out what authentic you would look at like is important, and that's a whole piece of work in itself. Trust is new behavior over time. I threw that in there. That's my addiction work. New behavior over time, and the exile needs to trust that the self will show up and that the protector parts can let go of their role. If we don't help the client build that relationship with the exile, if we don't give them like a menu of options, how to link, bind, or connect that self to exile relationship, or self to part relationship every day between sessions, you're going to lose it. And so I don't want to like insinuate anything, but from what I understand and what I've seen, I don't think therapists are doing that. And I'm not saying that you should, because I'm not really sure what that looks like. I'll give you an example in a minute of how I've done it, but it's interesting, I find, because it's really important. And we as EMDR therapists are spoiled because when we do it, it's done. When you link, bind, or connect, it's permanent. It's reconsolidation, which is a transformational experience, hence Bruce Eckert's work. So there's even research behind it. From the internal family systems perspective, there is a new relationship between the higher self and the former exiled part. So that's what we're working on. So here it is. So check in daily with unburdened parts for 3 to 4 weeks. Adjust to a new way of being in the world. Secure the relationship between the self and the former exile. Integrate protectors by helping them trust the self and let go of the old roles and allow for protector unburdening if necessary. This is a big ask. It just is. Like we got enough trouble like trying to get our clients through the week, and we're going to be like, well, I need you to go home and pull out a cot for your younger self, and let's start engaging with it every single day. It's tough, and so you guys, I don't know if you're going to appreciate this, but uh, I found AI to be priceless in this category. We put together an image of the client self-to-part relationship, and we have them put it on their phone, their screenshots on their phone. So it is in their face all the time. Because as you know, a phone is in one's face all the time. And so I took an example of a beautiful exile and higher self visual here. And so here we have like Mary and Jesus, and we've got like the angel Gabriel, and we have, who was this? It was Saint Gerard. No, Gerard. Yeah, I think so. He interpreted the Bible, whatever. We have another saint here. And then here are all the exiled parts that came out of the cave. And there is the unburdening going up into the stars. And this was the visual that we got. Literally took the story from the client and then asked for an image to be created. This image has been on the phone for, I don't know, 3 months. So if you're just looking for an idea, anything, right? This is something that works. And you know me, I'm like only going to put out there what works. What I did used to do is have them set an alarm, and then their alarm went off every day at like 4 o'clock, and it said, please check in with your part, right? Check in with your younger part that we worked with in session. And that was fine. That worked fine until the client literally had like 10 alarms going off. And so it didn't work anymore. So when we make these images, we like to bring in some of the old work that we've done. And so this is just a perfect example. We've got a lot of little children there hanging out by the ceremonial fire with all of this beautiful self energy. And so it's so anyway. I'm a problem solver. I come from an engineering background, so ish. Didn't make it as far as Eric. The story is not fully witnessed. There's no client follow up after the unburdening. Something traumatic happens in the client's life. These are all reasons why the burdens return. So protectors are threatened by healing and bring the burden back. And that's a big one. Legacy burdens is connected to the wound. And a legacy burden, like I said, I've got a really beautiful example of a legacy burden. Our parts within the system are using the burden. So the burden is actually helpful in some way, shape, or form. And there's no, like I said, no client follow through. That's the number one reason. The clients leave with great intentions, but they don't do it during the week. Life is crazy. And they're just like, I don't remember what we talked about last week. So that's why visual representation is priceless. The process of reclaiming power through self-led confrontation is impactful both internally and externally. So what are we talking about? First of all, trauma memories. It says steer clear of either side of polarization. So I love this because when you think of having a couple in for couples therapy, usually there's a part of us that sides with one or the other. Let's say that, you're a female, not that it matters, but, let's just say you have a couple and one cheated and you're just like, oh, that's not good. But we as therapists have to be neutral, right? We treat them as a system, and we're in the back, and we're not to side with one or the other. Well, that's exactly how we work with polarized parts. So I'm just going to use the polarized parts as an example that I had already brought up, which is the eating part and the angry part. The eating part eats, whenever it wants, and it eats whatever it wants. And the angry part's like, I want you out of here. Like, you're ruining everything. I want you out of here. In fact, I want you to die. And so these are polarized parts. So as a therapist, what are you going to do? You put them on a couch and you do couples therapy. And that's literally how you're going to get to the exile. It can be harsh when an extreme protector part hasn't given full permission. So, once again, you got a very angry part, and it's on a mission to get rid of the eating part. And I work with a lot of addiction, so this makes a lot of sense. Think about a eating disorder. Our clients are taught in a higher level care to literally lock that eating disordered part up in a cage and throw away the key. Same thing with 12-step groups when you are mandated to get sober. This doesn't work because of what we're talking about here. So, heal the wound first, then see how they feel about reaching out to the perpetrator part. It will have a different perspective after the unburdening. So when you're working with, and I'll show you the next slide is what describes this, here are the two parts. So we want to work with them, and there's the little exile underneath, and you can't get to the exile until you work with, and this would be this could be a perpetrator part, this could be an addiction part, this could be it's any kind of firefighter part. And then this is going to be yellow energy. This is another really important reason why polyvagal is here. This is going to be our yellow energy, and this is our red energy. And this is the part that's being beat up. This is the part that's like, this is go away. I want you out of here. So with the example of the anger versus the overeater is the dissociative part. And so it's going to be different for everybody. And sometimes you get two yellow energy parts. Sometimes you get two dissociative parts. But at the end of the day, we are healers. Many clients have parts that doubt that the trauma or want our instruction. Our job is to help them unload what they carry, not to determine if it really happens. So when I give trainings and we talk about working with polarized parts, for the EMDR therapists here, we do two-handed interweave. I do a whole day training on working with blocking beliefs, and blocking beliefs have a lot of polarized parts in them. And so when we do bilateral, we're working with the childlike part. It needs to give its story. It needs to share why it's coming from, where it came from, and that calms down the polarized part. And then we need them to work together. So not to go into too much detail, but it's just like in couples therapy. Two people, two truths, both matter. So working with polarized parts, working with couples are basically the same thing. And if you want to get to that exile, this is what we need to do. There's a whole chapter on working with polarized parts that Frank wrote that we did now a couple months ago. So unburdening without protector permission. We always say that the protector or a perpetrator or an abusive part of some sort, firefighter of some sort, if you unzip the costume, underneath is a very frightened, Erica, Roxana's here. There's a very frightened little child. And so I love to give my clients that visual. They'll also go to Chat GPT and do images of like very scary external parts. And then inside there's a terrified little child. We're starting to see more of that like on social media, because people are kind of picking up on the idea that they can put visuals. I'm a visual learner. So, the Chat GPT has been priceless for me to put visuals to the language. But this is exactly what we're looking at. We're looking at a protector part that is basically protecting a very, very young, terrified child. The true power comes when the self leads. You don't need them to make it right. You need to feel that it's true inside you. So once again, we're not problem solving. We're just honoring. We are welcoming and appreciating and acknowledging and accepting and building trust. That's our primary goal. So the science behind the healing, and Frank mentioned this, but of course I had to elaborate on it. Never want to leave a stone unturned. He does refer to Bruce Eckert's model. So grateful for that, because at the end of the day, hi, Roxana. At the end of the day, our whole phase 3 of EMDR is about Bruce Eckert's model. That when you juxtapose two opposing or mismatched experiences, that's what primes the brain for the re-encoding. And so when we talk about phase 3 in some of our advanced trainings, we literally talk about how important it is to have a negative belief cognition and a positive belief cognition that are back to back, and how the positive belief absolutely has to have some kind of energy. That if you have a VOC of 1, you might as well, like, if you have a VOC of 1, which means your positive belief cognition, how true does it feel? Not at all. There's no energy there, which means this isn't going to work. You need energy in both to prime the brain for reconsolidation. That's what Bruce Eckert says. And Bruce Eckert has the research behind him. So Bruce Eckert talks about the emotional learning, how it can be rewired. It's called memory reconsolidation. Healing requires a specific neurobiological sequence, not just insight or catharsis. This mirrors the unburdening process of IFS. So I love it. They're like saying, hey, what we do with the EMDR is also here with IFS. It's like, thank you for that. And we are looking for a trait change, not a state change. We're always talking about that with the EMDR. I want this to be a permanent transformational experience. I do not want it to be something that slips back to the old neurobiology. And then here I am up against the same problem. So once again, we've got self-energy is equivalent to our positive neural network. And then our part is going to be equivalent to our negative neural network. And we want to link, bind, or connect them. If there's no self-energy, it's not going to work. If there's no positive cognition or belief, it's not going to work. So IFS and EMDR are on the same page when it comes to this. And at the end of the day, we need the juxtaposition of the two energies in order to replace a new reparative experience. This is so essential right here for all of the work that we do. We want deep, lasting change, not just symptom relief. So I was really happy when Frank put this in the book. So just a review, I'm not going to spend too long on this, but just because I present this in other trainings, memory reconsolidation, Eckert, identify the unwanted symptom, bring it to conscious awareness. So you've got your implicit that you're bringing to explicit. That's your direct access. Very cool, right? Direct access implicit, direct explicit. And this occurs when the protective part grants the self-access. So now we've engaged in and we're able to identify that there is self, which is your positive neural network. We want to hold the two together. The transformational sequence is the mismatch or the contradiction. So here, nice, beautiful visual, you've got a juxtaposition. You've got the target, and then you've got the mismatched experience. So with the MDR, you've got your target with your negative belief cognition and your positive belief cognition. What would you prefer for yourself? And that is what sets the brain up. It primes the brain for the permanent change. And this is what we do with IFS. You have your target, which is your child part, your exiled part, or a protector part. And you have your mismatch experience, which is what would you prefer for yourself? Your adult part. So it's the exact same thing. Love that. And then the third step in this is all in Bruce Eckert's book, is once you get that mismatch, it takes 5 hours with talk therapy to make this transformational change. It takes 21 meetings in IFS, but it takes 20 minutes with the EMDR. So if you're like, well, I don't know if I want EMDR because this is, Frank says, I don't need EMDR because I'm doing IFS now. No, we need it all together as a family. We need EMDR, we need internal family systems, and we need polyvagal, because polyvagal gives us the map of what it is that we're supposed to do. So I get super excited about that. Let's see here, I'm looking at time. So I'm not going to go over this, but you can find it when you look at the time and go find it. It's just a chart that basically goes over the different neurobiological functions when you're working with EMDR and when you're working with internal family systems. And I just did this really for myself because I teach this all the time. And so I just like to have language to make that relationship. And then Frank's roadblocks to healing. We are the most these are the most common roadblocks. Anything from like the therapist limitations because their own parts are showing up, lack of follow through per session. That is the number one reason. And that's not on us. I'll be honest with you. That is not on us. You can, if you're an IFS therapist that have figured out a way to do this, please reach out to me because I'm not seeing therapists do this. So that day-to-day interaction between the parts, you can tell your client to do that, but I don't see it happening. So maybe I'm missing something. Maybe my training wasn't okay in that respect. Lack, let's see, protector parts needing unburdening first. That's interesting. I have to think about that one. I'd love to see an example of that. And then, yeah, so anyway, just legacy burdens. We're going to go over that. Unattached burdens. Not really even sure what that is. So we'll see. So let's see here. Complex wide trauma work gets stuck. So now we are going to go into polyvagal. Complex PTSD often brings extreme protective systems that slow progress. I love this. We use this in the basic training. The more hysterical, the more historical. Now, technically, that means the 20-80 rule. 20% of what you experience is about today. 80% comes from the past. So the more hysterical your 20% is today, the more historical and your trauma is going to be and its relevance. But from a polyvagal perspective, trauma responses are deeply wired in that brainstem, which is 500 million years old. So now there's a whole new definition here. The more hysterical, the more historical, seriously going back 500 million years. You know, I like to try to make a joke out of things. So I thought that was clever. So helping clients heal takes more than technique. It takes self, energy, patience, and persistence. So Frank talks about biology, and I struggled with this a little bit, but sudden therapy slows down, he says. Consider a biological shift. And I'm like, what does that mean? Does that mean like you went off your antidepressant medications? Does that mean that all of a sudden, you have something wrong with you and you need surgery? Does this mean that you've relapsed? That's not really, is that biological? So these feel like regressions, but often reflect a body brain state change. So maybe like menopause might be a good example. I don't know. So Anderson encourages asking, do any parts feel like something biological is happening? This is what I do appreciate. The part knows. So I'm like, well, I don't know, but the part knows. So don't be like, listen to Paula, just go ask the part because the part will know when you ask that question. And I don't doubt that because I'm shocked at what our parts know when we're not really sure. Some clients operate in constant chaos, cycling through emergencies. These parts are often hyper-aroused protectors who keep attention off the pain. Okay, this could be happening a lot right now. Don't get pulled into the drama. Stay grounded. Consistently offer a path forward, healing the wound instead of reacting to the crisis. This is Daniel Siegel's whole lifetime of research around name it to tame it. So constant chaos, we're seeing more and more of this. Our clients are coming in crisis on a regular basis. We are doing crisis sessions. By definition, a crisis session is the client leaves feeling better than they walked in the door. And if it's hyper arousal, we have a lot of options. When we look at phase 4, we do a deep dive of phase 4. We have lots and lots and lots and lots of options. Roy's going to be presenting on Sunday morning at the conference, the processing continuum. And he's going to talk about EMD, EMDR contained, EMDR unrestricted, as a continuum of options. If we look at what else we have, we've got Dr. Susie Matthijssen coming in and Dijon are going to be there. And another option would be EMDR 2.0. And then you have Flash, and then you have CPOS, and then you have What else do you have? What am I missing? So at the end of the day, we've got lots of options and we can use any of them because we're modifying our protocol to meet the client, to meet the parts where they're at. So I'm sorry, I'm bringing probably more EMDR in here than I need to, but we have a lot of options with this crisis issue that's going on in our external world. Therapists also have protectors that interfere. So there's rigid parts that defend against feeling intruded upon, and over giving parts that blur boundaries, trying to meet unmet needs. I'm going to give an example of the rigid parts. So we have to take into consideration, I mean, I would say that 75%, maybe even more, of my clients experience some type of sexual abuse. And so sexual abuse, for example, the number one fear of the perpetrator is to be caught. So the threats that go to our clients when they were young are, you don't tell anybody, nobody would listen to you anyway, you're a worthless piece of crap, and I'm the only one that cares about you. I mean, I've heard it all. So at the end of the day, those are the parts that protect the client. Because throughout the client's life as a child, when it was inescapable and nobody was protecting them, they needed these voices to keep them in line. Don't wear that pink dress. Don't go, don't tell anybody at school you're going to get beat. Don't tell other parents because your pets are going to be, disappear. Like there are threats to children. Those voices are still, these are the protector parts. They're very rigid parts because it's life or death. And those are some of the parts that we're up against. And when you go in, and this is why I am so passionate about making sure that we as EMDR therapists know how to modify, and we need to understand the client's trauma and all of the defenses, the managers and firefighters that come in to protect the client, that we don't blow through with our bilateral, because we have a tool that's super strong. Before 2014, 70% of clinicians didn't use EMDR, even though they got trained in it, because it was so strong. It was too much. You ask people, it was too much. This is why. Because the minute you went in and the bilateral brings up trauma content, the more trauma content that came up, these rigid parts came in and said, absolutely not. We are not allowed to tell anybody anything. And that's where you get avoidance. That's where you get no-shows. That's where you get all kinds of blocking beliefs. And so this is super important to be able to respect the fact that these parts are doing a darn good job. And that because they're doing that good job, that's what kept the client safe when they were younger. So that is I think a good example of what this slide represents. So these parts can block the IFS process. These parts can block everything, any type of therapy. It doesn't matter which orientation you're using. And the more you unburden, the less your parts show up in the therapy room. Yes, Eric, I love it. I get a little pop.
Woo!
And my
Hey,
grandson
there's a
loves
question that just popped up in the chat, and I'm going to say that the answer depends. But the question is, are these perpetrator parts? And my thought is, it depends. But I don't know how you might answer that.
What's the question? I missed the question.
Are those perpetrator parts?
Yeah, that's exactly what they are. Perpetrator parts, perpetrator imitator parts, parent imitator parts. They have all kinds of names. Alters. Yeah, that's exactly what they are. And they are very specific. Like I have a client that will plop down and say, oh, I'm so fat and lazy and ugly. And I just immediately say, who said that to you? You were not born with that. Yeah, dad used to say that all the time. How fat I was, how ugly I was, because that's how he controlled her. And so she's still doing it to this day, 30, 40, 50 years later. So yes, good question. I'm really all about this 21 days. A common roadblock, lack of continuity from session to session. I'm sorry, I feel like we're being set up as therapists on this one. Protectors want to know, can I trust you to come back for this part? No, you can't. I mean, not because you're not a good therapist, but this is a really big ask. So once again, I hope I'm not offending anybody, because for those of you out there that are like, no, I make sure that I, talk to the client right away about what we worked on last week, and I bring that part up and we go right in. And I think that's amazing. And I just, it's probably, maybe it's a part of me that's trying to validate the fact that I'm not that organized, but I think I'm doing good with the visuals. But protectors want to know, can they trust? Don't start every session with, what do you want to work on today? Well, that's exactly how I start my session, because there's so much crisis. But instead, honor the original contract and stay with the part until it's ready to step back. And so this is Frank's book. Like, dude, you get to do you. I'm just saying that's a lot harder than it sounds, especially when you know that every client's going to come in and talk about this weekend. And am I going to say, well, can we go back and work with that part of you from last week? Like, no, 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 no. We're talking about the weekend. And maybe that's my part, I don't know. Anyway, nothing like transparency, right? Ah, love the slide. Some protectors carry deep pain of their own. They may need to unblend first before giving permission to reach an exile. So there's often, this is often overlooked. And I agree with that, because I have to admit, I don't know that I ever use this, but can unlock forward movement. So ask directly, do you need to release something before we go further? Never even thought of that question. So that's really cool. So I love this visual, because this is what this protector, there's the castle, there's the exile in the back there. And then here's the protector, and the protector needs to unburden all of this before it can give you permission to go back and work with that exile. So that's super cool. I thought that was cool. The drift factor. When therapy gets stuck, it's tempting to abandon the IFS frame. Many therapists revert to talk therapy due to frustration or hopelessness. Anderson calls this the drift factor. Stay the course, get support. Supervision can reconnect you to the model and the self. I run a lot of consultation groups. It's 8 of us that get together on a monthly basis. We talk about how our month was. We talk about what we're learning, what trainings we're taking, and we do case consultation. The majority of case consultation is parts. I am the one that pulls in the polyvagal, and all of the therapists are EMDR trained. So, and my takeaway is, and that's why I put all of these people down here. It's not me that's catching the therapist that needs the assistance. It's all of us. Our groups are just very supportive of each other. And it's just, it really warms my heart that we can all take care of each other. And I always say to my therapist, please don't be in this work alone. Just don't, please. Like, and if anybody ever wants a referral for a therapist, I just say, you ask the therapist if they're getting consultation. If they're getting monthly consultation, they are a good therapist, because I'm not implying that anybody's a bad therapist, but we can't be in this alone, and we always need somebody else's perspective. That's what processing is. You put your case out there. You even solve your own problems as you're putting your case out there. You're hearing yourself talk about it. So anyway, I'm a huge, huge advocate for consultation. And then what are legacy burdens? Legacy burdens are emotional and belief-based burdens passed down through family, culture, race, religion, gender, and or identity-based systems. They are often invisible because they've been with the client so long and they feel like it's just the way things are. These burdens shape how clients see themselves and their place in the world, often without conscious awareness. Clients may carry them out of loyalty to family, even if the beliefs are harmful. Once named, legacy burdens are often easily identified and released with the help of self-energy. How legacy burdens block healing. Legacy burdens often show up as internalized shame, silence, fear, or oppression, and they feel like personal truths. Because they've been lived with for so long, clients normalize them and don't realize how deep they affect their system. They often need to be addressed before exiles can be assessed or unburdened. Differentiating what belongs to the client versus what was taken on is a key step. I am going to stop reading in a minute. Self energy helps sort what is essential to keep and what is ready to be released. Okay, so here's the deal. We have, like, for example, shame. This is another reason why I switched over to IFS. This was my number one question. First day, I think, of IFSCA, where I asked this question, and Mel answered it perfectly. And I'm like, I am in the right place. I said, what do we do with shame? And she said, we give it back. Shame is not ours. Shame was put on us. Shame was given to us. It could almost bring tears to my eyes. It's not ours. Oh my gosh, how liberating. We give it back. It's not mine. Oh my gosh, I love this visual. It's not mine. It was put on me by either society, my culture. It's so anyway, it's so freaking empowering. It's ridiculous. So this is beautiful. So legacy burdens are just a really powerful experience in themselves. And so we're not going to, let's see. So the science behind legacy burdens, the epigenetic research confirms that trauma can be passed biologically, not just behaviorally. A child can inherit PTSD-like symptoms through gene expression changes, like DNA methylation. These changes can result from trauma in the parents before conception. Okay, I get that. Stress in utero, I get that. Environmental chaos after birth, I don't get that. Why is that biological? But anyway, internal family systems may help reverse or soften these effects by supporting clients in unburdening inherited trauma. So yes, I totally support that statement. That's why we're here. There is this connection, if it's through DNA, if it's not through DNA. At the end of the day, if your mother is bipolar and you are bipolar, how much of that came from biology and how much of that came from the environment. I guess maybe at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, but you can ask your client, how to unburden a legacy burden. Legacy burdens can be released with or without witnessing, but often carry a message. So we want to help the client by saying, do you have anything to tell me before you go? So we want the burden that we're going to release to share with us what it needs us to know, which is really powerful. Releasing the burden requires self-energy, clarity, and compassion. And letting go can bring immediate relief, but also sadness, loyalty, pain, and a sense of loss. And so stay with it. What are unattached burdens? Well, they're energies, they're entities that don't belong to the client at all. So if you came through a generation after generation of addiction or poverty or there's gender identity or mental health, or it can be absolutely anything. It's not yours. You are yours. You are you. But what is it that we need to release before we can really start to embrace authentic you? They may feel scary, foreign, overwhelming, and often block access to self. Parts carry unattached burdens, often saying things like, it's not me, or it came from somewhere else. I have a client that knows full well that her shame came from somewhere else, came directly from her mother. But when we went to work with it, the client said to me, we are not touching my shame, because if we do, then I will relapse. So that's really powerful. We're honoring and putting language to the client's shame, and the client is not going to let go of it. That's the work. So what is it that we want to hold on to? What is it that the shame is providing? Because when we think of shame, it is a part that's holding shame. So she is a part of her that keeps her sober, but it's enmeshed right now with the shame. So that's our work. They are not dangerous, but they feed on fear and avoidance. And those, as you know, are going to be parts. So back to the release of unattached burdens, ask the part, is this burden really yours? The client will know. Is it yours? Is it your parents? Is it society's? Is it your culture? Self energy, that calm, clarity, compassion is the healing agent. So the client absolutely needs to have that self energy front and center. Sometimes clients invite spiritual support, gods, ancestors, angels. It can be anything, whatever it is. Resourcing resource figures in Laurel Purnell's work is so powerful. And then you can strengthen and enhance them with tapping in. It's a book I recommend at the basic training. It's cheap and it's life-changing. These burdens may carry a message. Once heard, they often dissolve or transform. As Dick Schwartz says, nothing can hurt you internally if you're not afraid of it. So let's bring these burdens into the light and let them share their message. And they have a lot of really important information and messages. So the recap on what it is that we're looking at here is the most common roadblocks in complex trauma treatment is, once again, the biological conditions, crisis driven, like we're experiencing now, therapist limitation, where we're working with our own parts that are activated, therapist parts getting activated, lack of follow through session to session. We haven't, we spent a lot of time just kind of honoring that's difficult. Protector parts needing unburdening first. Think of that protector part with all those burdens in the backpack. The drift factor, abandoning IFS. Stay in a group that's IFS oriented. Bring your cases and say, I got stuck here. It's so exciting when you all work on it together. And then getting indoctrinated into the client's beliefs, being pulled in, sucked in because our parts are relating to them, or the client's just really good. And then legacy burdens and unattached burdens. Legacy burdens, like I said, we're not going to do it today, but I'm gonna give you a heads up. I don't know, Eric. I could create just a video on this and put it out. That's going to be separate. I'll show you what I did. I've got like 2 minutes here, but I have, and I do want to honor this story, so I wouldn't want to cram it in, but I have a story. It's called The Pebble and the Basket. And it's a powerful unburdening session where a client has several parts, dissociative part, shame part, and a rage part. And the therapist and the client turn their attention to the shame. I thought shame was a good one. And this part appears as like a black tar, like clinging to the client. So that's what you see up here, right? And yet it's kind of cool because this is this type of carrying in some cultures, there's like an ancestral like duty or loyalty inherited because the shame's head is like right here next to the client. But also the client is holding the shame in a really interesting way. So we've got the shame that's sticking to the client. It's not letting go at all. And in fact, when it's asked what it's willing to let go of, it's willing to let go of a pebble. And that's where the story comes from. And it's super cool because then the unburdening starts to happen and the pebble is handed to the client's mother. And then the mother passes it to her mother, who passes it to her husband, who passes it to his mother. His mother came across, the ocean from Ireland. And then the pebble gets passed to her brother, who's a priest. And then he unburdens it because he gets to choose. This is how you do these types of unburdening. And Dick Schwartz used to teach this all the time, but now they do this like one and done, just release it. And it doesn't work for a lot of clients with complex trauma. And so the priest releases the pebble and he receives a basket of God's love. And then he hands that God's love back to his sister, who hands it to let me think about this for a minute. The sister hands it to the son, who hands it to the wife, who hands it to the mother. And the mother is holding this basket of love. And then the client has never seen her mother in that light before. And it was transformational. And so we have 2 minutes left, and I just want to say thank you for coming. And Eric, it's up to you how we're going to do this.
What a delightful way to end the formal part of the book study. And I am going to hit the stop recording button.
Okay. Just know, you know what? It just